We've just been to the first Arizona International Market's night market. It's alright. There was food there that I could eat, and it's small, but you gotta start somewhere. It's a lot better than the one we went to out on the other side, which was definitely bigger, but cost $5 to get in. This place was free, and yeah, it was good. Now we're getting gas, because we have no gas. Gas. Even this car uses it. So we've come out for another drone flight, and this time we walked 1.5 kilometers back into the desert so we could see some different land features. But we have spent the day getting off the side of the road for these ATVs to pass us by repeatedly. They're quite dusty. So we'll just let them pass. And continue on our way. We tested it a few... Oh, for fuck's sake, people. Stop stopping.
There's a gate.
We're here at the park and swap just to see what the American cultural equivalent to a Taiwanese night market is. So... there's a lot more going on here than there was at the night market, which is a shame, but there you go. Today I'm going to give you a little background. My life story. We haven't gone into this much. It'll be clear why in maybe next week. I don't know. When I was a kid, I had 3 things I was interested in. Dinosaurs, forestry, and computers. And we don't need to go in why, but I ended up realizing that there was no profit in forestry. and they made you fight fires if you were a forest ranger. And... there were hardly any actual working paleontologists in the planet at the time I was getting ready to go to college. And hell of a degree program you had to go through to get there. Computers was the way of the future. So I had, and part of the reason I was into computers is I had a computer from about the time I was 13. And in fact, when I was 13, I got my first job writing programs for people because, you know, where did you turn to? You had to go to some kid. So that was back in like 1978. So starting back 40 years ago. 40 years ago. But I enjoyed it, and that turned out to be what I decided to go to university for. And it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, but while I was at university, I ran out of money. And so I ended up having to work, do what I could to have money to live. Not ashamed of that. I had a friend who, a little more blue collar than I would have liked to have been, but they were working in a electrician's job, and they needed help. So I started digging ditches. And fortunately, doing electrical work is frankly not rocket science, and was very, very easy for me to pick up. And so you could bluff your way across and change jobs and work your way up. Long story, but anyway, I reached the point where I was doing work of journeyman, electrician, wireman, lineman, and then ultimately troubleshooter, which turned out to be my forte. Just like debugging computer programs, frankly, only a lot simpler and really, really easy. Surprising how difficult it was for other people, but anyway, neither here nor there. All this time I would try still doing computer stuff. I would occasionally get some jobs. I would do some programming for people. I was working my way to get back into college and finish off my degree program. And I was running a bulletin board system. I had a really, really old first generation FidoNet. And one of the other people here in town had a business that sold software to electrical contractors, and so I got with them, and they recognized that I was talented with regards to fixing computers, solving problems, and not a salesman, and what they needed was salesmen. So I started hanging out at their place, and I would pick up work from them, helping out their clients, and doing various bits and pieces of work. So I wouldn't call that a full-time job, but I did spend most of my time there because I was living in a trailer. It didn't have air conditioning, or not proper air conditioning, or heat. And so I would just spend, a good 18 hours a day in their offices, using their facilities, and their racquetball courts, and their kitchen, and air conditioning and heating and whatnot. And they didn't mind because I was always there and available to help fix problems, and I'd get some money. And well, one day wasn't exactly one of their customers. It was a friend of the owner who worked at an insurance company, and they had another friend or acquaintance, I don't know what you want to call him, who was in computers and did programming for them. And this friend was one of the owning partners of an insurance company, and their systems were down, and the programmer was nowhere to be found. And so they were desperate, and so the guy that ran the company I was hanging out at asked if I'd go over there and give it a shot, which I did. And it was a custom-built insurance payment system, basically keeping track of payments on insurance policies. And it just stopped working, and it had this error message. It was very cryptic and didn't make much sense. And they said, well, I said, well, what happened that caused this to go out? Because it was out, and everyone that was using it was out. And they, well, it was working tomorrow, but it just doesn't work today. And we get this error message. And this happens every few months or so. And, we have to call nameless programmer, and he comes over and he does something and he gets it fixed, and, no problem. But the problem is today we can't get hold of him, and we're shut down. So I'm like, so it was working fine yesterday, but not today. And you didn't do anything different. Like, nope, just doesn't work today. Okay. So I set the clock back on one of their computers a day, and suddenly the program started working. I'm like, oh, well, now that's interesting, isn't it? And so then I set the clock back to today's date, or that day's date, and it stopped working again. And I'm like, well, that's very suspicious. So I opened up a hex editor, because in those days, and looked inside the binary code for the program and searched through it for dates. And sure enough, I found that day's date. So I changed it to tomorrow's date, and then fired up the computer again, and lo and behold, the program worked. Set the date on the computer to tomorrow, and amazingly enough, that same error. So this guy was scamming them. Plain and simple. He had built a time bomb into their code so that periodically he would have to come in, do some work for them, and fix the problem, which is ridiculously unethical. And so I hex edited the code so that it was far in the future, probably December 31st, 1999. And then I made my report to the owner of the company, or the co-owners of the company. And they were fascinated by this. And they took my information as if they could use some more help. And just as they were, kind of asking me a few more questions, I was giving them the answers. Well, who turns up but their programmer that had been, I just hadn't been able to get hold of you. And in retrospect, I think he was trying to make them sweat. He knew that their program was going to blow up. And he just didn't want them to think, his services weren't so valuable that without him, they had to, keep him on retainer. So they said goodbye to me, they lied to him. They lied to him why I was there. They told him some story about how the other guy had asked them to let me come over and talk to them about some thing that they had. And then they said, see you later, we'll talk to you later. And I didn't really think anything of it, except that they called me the next day and they said, do you know what that guy did? He actually came in and asked for a raise that day. So we fired him on the spot. Are you available for a job? And we've been thinking about getting a guy in here to handle all the computers and the network and do some programming for us. And we'll even send you to the class that there was a special language, I can't even remember what it was, that was the thing that their database system had been written in. And that just, overnight, that just fell in my lap. And so I took it. So that was my first official full-time, hey, you're getting a payroll and you're having taxes taken out for a computer job. And I worked at that insurance company for 3 years. And I will tell you more about that next time.